Oscarelli, ladies and gentlemen. We have the tall man, Angus Scrimm. We have the world's greatest ice cream man, Reggie Phantasm. We got Jody from 1 and 3, that is Bill Thornberry. The lady in the lavender, we got Kat Lester. Oh yeah. Kind of the tall man in a weird creepy way if you think about it. We got Mark Major, who is the mortician in Phantasm 2. And Gloria Lynn Henry, which you know from Phantasm 3, one of the toughest Phantasm ladies. And did I get everybody now? No, forgiving you. All right. Awesome. Welcome all. You'll have to share the mic, Jones. I think we seem to be lacking in the microphone department. We got plenty of seats. Well, welcome to the Phantasm family here. Is that on now? That last mic's not on for Don, I don't think. Well, and I'm going to start with you, Don. How did the Phantasm begin? Where did it generate? Where I know that you've done films before with several of them.
Well, first off, thank you all for the very, very kind and generous reception. We really appreciate it. And thank you to the Cinema Set for bringing us all out tonight. The first film was a labor of love, and we're all still good pals, and it's fun to get together and see one another. As far as where it came from, my love of horror films. I mean, you'll see a lot of influences. I certainly did watching it there. You know, I grew up in the 50s, the sci-fi horror thrillers. Actually, I saw them in the 60s, and then in the 70s I was able to turn them into a film. Invaders from Mars and others like that. But it came from my desire to make a horror film, and hopefully a horror film that actually caused some kind of effect with the audience. Maybe I overdid it a little too much, I was not saying there, but anyway.
Now this film strikes, there's a bizarre, like when I think of 1979, to me there's almost like a Blue Velvet kind of, that to me almost is 1979 in a weird way when you look back on it. It's a weird love of that time period that, it's fascinating. I want to know, you did a couple dramas coming into this. It has a dramatic feel to it. It almost seems wholesome when Jody goes, oh heck, and there's things like that. There's like a wholesome family feel. It's like if all 8 is enough got slaughtered and only the little kid was left. This is the nightmare he would have. And I was wondering what comes into that, going into making it almost a drama in a weird way.
Well, I thought there was a lot of good comedy elements myself. But,
right.
You know, certainly I guess I was a creature of the times. You know, I'm groaning a little bit when I'm seeing those bell bottoms that Jody's wearing. But, you know, I think it also came with the way that the film was made, and that it was a script that was written, was a little too long. We had to, you know, radically edit it, and it was shot over a very long period. We all worked on it for about a year. And so we were fine-tuning and changing things as we didn't have the ending, you know, until maybe the last day of filming. We didn't know what we were going to do in that respect. But I also think that what you're talking about, a lot of that just comes from the nature of the actors. Once again, revisiting it, there's really a lesson, I think, in terms of making effective horror films that I was watching, is that you really need to be invested in the characters. You need to care about that kid. You need to care about the relationship with the brother. And you need, of course, to have a good best friend, pal that they can rely on, and then, of course, the evil duo, we should call, between Kat and Angus here.
So, as the actors, when you come in, everyone has such great entrances that you immediately care for everyone. As soon as Reggie comes in and the thing's flying around, and you're immediately, you love Reggie as soon as he comes in. The tall man, with limited movement, he comes in there and you're scared to death and the guy's not even moving at you. And then there's the scene where you're playing guitar. How was it like coming into these performances and what brought them to life, each one of you?
Don, I think, was able to put us all at ease and tried to look and bring out the strengths in all of us, and we created that kind of an environment. Reggie and I were, when we weren't shooting, we were sitting in chairs, playing. So we spent a lot of time, passing the time just, playing guitars and writing songs and stuff like that. So I didn't realize until much later on after the movie, though, that, in the scene when I'm, making out with the lady in lavender, I'm actually making out with a tall man, which is kind of a strange deal. But
I should have mentioned the lady in lavender has a very memorable beginning as well.
Absolutely, she's a great lady.
Thank you.
Reg?
Yeah, I think that Angus was kind of surprised with the lady in lavender thing too.
I was surprised.
And but the scene with Bill and I playing guitar, which I think is just a pretty bitchin' scene. That was kind of thrown on us at kind of a last minute kind of a thing, sort of. We needed to come up with some music, and we talked about doing something that was already written by another group. Or we talked. I guess you had the Stones shirt on, and we said, should we do a Stones? Well, what should we do? And then I asked Bill, if he had been working on anything. You'd had a little bit of this one piece. And then we just kind of sat down for a few minutes before the scene and figured out all the finger work and stuff, and it worked well.
And Angus, what was your, coming in to play the part, what was your thoughts at the very beginning and your role?
Well, it was such an incongruity to me that I would be asked to play a villain. I had always thought of myself as the suave William Powell, Cary Grant comedy type. But as a 12-year-old, I had, by very indulgent parents, been allowed at last to see my first horror film, so I had seen the Karloffs and the Lugosi's and even some of the old Lon Chaneys. And it was actually kind of thrilling to have a chance to play. And of course, the tall man was all there in the script. I didn't have to do anything much. As has been pointed out, Don does give his character such great entrances, always has. Did it again for me and for all the rest of the cast in his wonderful Masters of Horror episode, Incident on and Off. So, have I answered the question? I tend to ramble a bit.
Well, you say you didn't have to do much, but if you try to imagine any other human being in that part, you don't really have Phantasm. So, I mean, just...
I think that honestly, I think that the great tribute, for Angus is that his screen time is minimal, but his impact is incredible. I mean, he's the man. That's it.
Well, there's certainly a clear script like Hospital. He has one damned entrance after another all through the picture.
Yeah, speaking of entrances, yeah, the legs, they were looking pretty good, actually. But I'll never forget that. I remember I was laying there behind the stone, and you were way back, and you said, "Lift your skirt higher!" And then I could only take a few takes. "A little higher, Cat!" Or Kathy then. And then you actually just finally gave up and came over and lifted my skirt even higher. But I have to admit, it worked. It did. And what do you think? And I was really surprised to find out that I was the alter ego of the tall man. Very pleased. Pleased to find out that I was the villainess. Always wanted to be.
There's a lot of, I mean, it's a hilarious film, and it's all based on a lot of times people finally actually acknowledging things in a horror film, like someone not wanting to go first, or I think Mikey's, because that's what I would say if the tall man popped in the room, I would kind of just go, where was that all in the script? Were you guys thinking, like, how would this actually react while you were filming? What much is in the script and what was just made up?
Certainly the after you thing was in the script, but of course it was the way that the three actors pulled that off. I think that thing, you know, how could you write that in the script until you'd seen the blood fly and the urine flow, and then you think about, oh, well, how are we going to add to that? How's the actor going to perform? And so I imagine that was some sort of an on-set thing, that little bit. But, you know, once again, first off, one of the key components who's not here today, which is Michael Baldwin, probably, in my mind, one of the greater child actors that has ever performed. He brought so much realism to the role. And certainly, to put him up with a classically trained actor like Angus in that, I was just noticing that sequence, there's no dialogue, but the face-off and the way they come step by step, you know, they just made it come to life, and it's not something you can write, really.
One last question before I open it up to everyone else, but I just want to talk about that. There's many of you are musicians, but the musicality, you could just turn off the projector and listen to this film, and a lot of early 90s metal bands basically just did the Phantasm soundtrack, and it would just be metal with like Angus sampled over top of it. There is music way ahead of its time in this film all the way through. Where did all that come from? And even the musicality of the actors towards the soundtrack.
Yeah, you know, musically, of course, Fred Myrow was huge in this film. He came up with that 9-note pattern originally, and he was also part of the Coscarelli family of creativity way before. When we did Kenny and Company, which you guys know, it's a great movie. When we did Kenny and Company, we needed some stuff going on. I met Fred at that point right in Belmont Shore. We went and had some lunch in Long Beach, and I met Fred, and he was going to do the music, and then I was for Kenny and Company, and then I was going to help as like a musical supervisor. I had a studio that we could go to, a friend of mine where I'd been recording before, Paul Ratajak, and who also recorded this stuff and a bunch of other stuff that we've done.
But it's an interesting point you make, Grant, about the musicality of the cast, because in retrospect, every one of the actors is a musician or Grammy Award winner, in the case of Mr. Scrim, for classical album liner notes. So
yeah, and then when we Paul's studio in Long Beach at his girlfriend's folks' house, which I don't know how he got away with that, but it was a great little studio, and me and Fred and Bill Cohn, who played Tommy in this, who always wanted to be a creature, and he got to be a creature.
And Paul's girlfriend was in the Volkswagen getting rode by the dwarf.
That's right. So I mean, it was like a whole family kind of a thing. And Fred, of course, stuck with us all the way through. It turns out that Fred was great friends with Jim Morrison, and also great friends with a great friend of mine who I was in a group with in the 60s, Van Dyke Parks. And so, I mean, it was just almost like this fabric of stuff.
Let me jump in and also mention that Fred had a collaborator in Malcolm Seagrave, and he was a key component of that also. But maybe before we go further, we could get a little sampling for all these great people who are going to watch 4.5 hours of Phantasm tonight, a little preview of the upcoming movies, and we could jump into Phantasm 2 with Mark Major down there, and ask him, how did you come into this series, Mark?
Well, I think you had something to do with it, Don. How did I come into this series? Well,
I just had trouble finding an appropriate person for a very notorious scene, and somehow I wound up with it.
Okay. I see your hand grew back, though. Well, we don't want to give anything.
All right.
And then on to Phantasm 3, we've got Gloria Lynn Henry here, and maybe we can have her tell us a little bit about Facing Up to the Tall Man.
I love Facing Up to the Tall Man. I love this movie because it left me, it just gave me a piece of my history, because when I first saw one, I'm not going to tell you how old I was, but I was young, and he scared me so bad, especially the part where he says, boy, and he yanked him through the mirror, and I was like, oh my God, I mean, for years, I was just so scared to go past a mirror, but now I love mirrors. I'm just kidding. And but I got to do 3, and I'm one scene in particular. I'm working with Angus, and I told the story before, and I love this story. Is that we had to throw this javelin, at Angus, and it's a quiet set, and everyone's scared, and the tension is there, and I just start, laughing hysterically, and Don's like, cut, cut, cut. He says, what's going on? I said, I'm in a movie with the tall man. I'm like so excited. So then we do the scene again, and then I start crying. And he goes, well, cut, what's going on, Gloria? I said, I'm in a movie with the tall man. I mean, to be scared by somebody now you're working with, and then Reggie, and just all these beautiful people, and my experience, it was actually my first movie ever, and I didn't have anything to draw from, and so all I could draw from was Wesley Snipes. Because at the time, he was like, the action hero, so I was going to be the female Wesley Snipes. So if you notice, everything I did, I was just trying to, be Wesley Snipes through the whole movie. But it was really good. And I just, being asked to be in it was just such, an honor for me. And to be the first black female not to die for sci-fi ever. Okay, just so you know. I'm happy.
We're going to open it up, because I know you guys have to have some fantastic questions here. Right there.
I was really struck by the editing this time and how well it flowed. How much of the first one was discovered in the editing as opposed to this script?
I think so much of it, we, unfortunately back then, I was also thinking about back then, shooting on film and the limited amount that we had, and I was realizing how many sequences were shot for one thing and then repurposed for another, where we'd have an expression of, the kid from some night location and we needed a close-up, and now I see him inside the mausoleum. So absolutely, the movie was not completely, but it was certainly fabricated, constructed, and rebuilt, torn apart, and built again in the editing. And it was probably why it has that nightmarish feel to it, because a lot of times we didn't have the money to go back and explain what was going on, so we'd figure out some sort of editorial fix to it, and it frequently took it into a dream-like quality, I think.
It does both. It gives it a dreamlike quality, but it also makes you feel like this world is going on and you just miss something. Like they really are brothers, and it cuts away, and it cuts right in the middle of them talking. So you feel like, well, this is almost like their family movie that I found, except they're being chased by the tall man. So it also adds this bizarre realism, which is just unbelievable. Shout out. I just want to chime in. I had no point. There you go.
The original script on a complete read. What happened to Pearson's family originally? After all the action in this town, it seems like you would want to come back here. What originally happened to the family?
Well, they had the parents had been killed, and I believe the concept was some kind of a car crash, and then the twist on it was that Mike was alive. Jody had died in a car crash. Gets a little confusing. You just gotta roll with it.
What we got right there?
Me? Yeah. Well, good evening, folks. I want to congratulate you on the 30th anniversary of the original Phantasm.
Thank you very much.
My 37th birthday as well. So, Mr. Best Friend, like I asked for, I want to thank Mr. Scrim for playing the Grim Reaper in the Nut House. Mel Brooks. That's given me one more reason to hold my breath for the DVD, hopefully. And by the way, will there be any more commentaries on the future DVD releases? Because I would love to hear how you came up with the bronze and platinum spheres for the Phantasm 2. Now that was the best thing, one of the best things about it by far. That had the best spheres of the entire series.
Well, thank you for all of those comments. Yeah, but the problem is Phantasm 2 finally is going to be released on DVD through Universal on Tuesday. We've been waiting for a long time. That's the good news. The bad news is there's no commentary track on it. But there is a nice commentary track we recorded for the Anchor Bay UK version, but you need to get the home region player to track that down. So, fortunately.
Happy birthday.
Well, we go over there.
Yeah. I was thinking about the possibility of Phantasm and the Roger Avery script if it's ever going to get made, and if not, maybe you guys might do a graphic novel or something.
Yeah, that was one of the possibilities. Just a quick recap on what happened is that after we finished Phantasm 3, the whole franchise was just sort of sitting there, and I had been friends with Roger Avery, and he was just a young guy. He used to come over to my office. This was back in the day when computers were rare, and he and his partner would collaborate, because I had a computer in my office, and I'd let them use it. But at any rate, Roger went on and wrote this movie called Pulp Fiction with Quentin Tarantino, and he received the Academy Award for it. And I went and saw him a few weeks after he won the Academy Award, and it was like out of one of those Disney commercials, because it's like, Roger Avery, you just won the Academy Award. What are you going to do? Don, how about I write the end-all kick-ass Phantasm sequel to wrap the whole series up? And so, yeah, I said, great, do it. And he wrote this really terrific script. It's epic, it's huge, it has incredible roles for Reggie and Tall Man and everybody, and it was just too big, and there was just no model to go, that big in a franchise that had so many sequels already made. So unfortunately, this script went by the wayside, and yeah, it would be really cool to make it into a graphic novel someday. I think that might be the ultimate plan for it.
That's great there.
I'm curious about, I always wondered, every time I watch each chapter, I'm always kind of amazed at how you expand on mythology. I've always wondered, was any of this planned, or you just kind of make it up as you go? Because you always find a way to explain some of the things that happened before that seems perfectly organic in the series. So has it always been there, or are you just kind of like, oh shit, now what do I do?
Well, that's not really a question I should answer. But in listening to it, I realized that what's the beauty of a filmmaker being able to continually make additional chapters in a saga like that is that you have the chance to go back and rethink things and fix certain things and expand on certain things. And so, yeah, it's a combination of all of that, although there's no question that the original movie, when it was made, was just a standalone one-shot deal. I mean, Mike, Reggie, Jody, Lady Lavender wiped out, Tall Man wins, end of story. But, the financial pressures to make a sequel were there, and, I wanted to make a movie, and came up with how we're going to begin the next movie when it starts here, which I was very proud of, actually.
One other question about the art direction for this film. When you were filming, you had like two giant metal standing things that you stuck his hand through. That could either look awesome, which it did, or look ridiculous in a way. And with the blowing of the wind and being blown in, there was that, or the thing with the slide, it was doing it. When you were shooting it, did you think, oh my God, this could look ridiculous? And there was awesome imagery. Who was responsible for the giant black tubs that have the people in it to go in through the...
The tubs were loaned to us by a company that manufactured them, and we saw these things, and they cost a fortune, and they're for toxic waste. And when you see Phantasm 2, we needed the same tubs, but now we could only get them used, so they all had toxic waste in them. So whenever there was any kind of a leak, it caused a major freak out on the set. But thank you for the comments on the production design. The production designer was my mother, who also did the makeup for the actors, and we had a great art director, David Brown, who came on and did a lot of the other cool stuff.
It's one of those things that's miraculous. It's frightening. It's kind of like the sticks in Blair Witch, where you're like, what is this? Why are there two metal things sticking out of the ground? It's much more frightening that way.
But your question, though, about whether it was certainly conceptually some of the stuff really was ridiculous, but I have to go back to the fact that the actors playing it were very serious and they grounded it. I mean, the thing that I always enjoyed, for instance, maybe one of the scenes that's so far out there, and it gets a lot more laughter than I ever expected, is the sequence with the bud when the two brothers grab. And I'm forcing Bill there to do this solo go-go dance thing with the thing. But the thing is I was just watching it there, but he stops, and then for a moment everyone stops laughing and they get into it for a second, and he does it in such a fashion that there's a surprise and pulls it off. So, I was really so lucky to have actors who could roll with this and help me to make it real.
Yeah, you really buy into that. And the other question I wanted to put the midget zombies. It's so strange that why would they be cut? Where did that come from? You automatically believe those must exist because no one would think of that. Where did they come from?
I don't know. Up here somewhere. I mean,
there's a bunch of
problems.
When also he picks up his finger that turns into the fly thing. Why would he do that? What made you think that?
Well, when you're working on something that's so inherently bizarre and strange, to get from point A to point B, we had to get back to Jody at the house and convince him, and we needed some kind of an evidence, and then, we could just take the finger, And I mean, I made the movie when I was young. I was able to take risks and leaps back then because I didn't know any better. And
We have time for a few more when you're right there.
Yeah, only idea I've ever had that came from a dream. It was a couple of years before I wrote the script. I had this nightmare of spheres flying down corridors. And then, once we started making the movie, we enhanced it with the drills and the blood and the popping and all that stuff. That's where it came.
Wait a minute.
I was really touched by how they got all the heart. I love that. At the end, the mother telling them that, that everything's going to be all right and all stick together. I wanted to go see any locations where it was shot. Are there any of them standing?
Yeah, they all are, basically. Yeah. Well, for Phantasm 3, there's a great mausoleum in Compton called Angelus Abbey. But the house is up in Oakland. It's called the Dunsmuir Mansion. They have tours up there. You can look it up on the web under dunsmuirmansion.com. Just off the top of our head, we shot all the graveyard stuff was shot in Chatsworth Park North. And we just took tombstones and put them out there. Where else did we shoot this movie? There's a house in Pacific Palisades, yeah. The town of Julian, where the kid's on Main Street with the tall man, clumping down the street, and with Reggie's ice cream truck in the fog. That's the town of Julian down south, like near Escondido. And all those, if you go down, all of them, the Main Street's still there, and it looks.
Where can I start into that basement?
We actually built that in a warehouse in Chatsworth on Mariel Street. Right there.
Where's Michael?
Michael Baldwin. He's living in Texas now. Yes, and he's actually for a time he had opened an acting school and was doing very well with that. I'm not sure that he's doing as much with that nowadays.
Is he going to be in Erie with us
Yes.
in October?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Your people say yes.
Ready with it? Far back and then we'll get you.
Yeah. Can we hear Angus say boy?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can do it as well as Gloria and Henry just did. Boy.
take one more right there.
Yeah, when this movie was made, it was over T-17 rating. What did you actually do to get it down to an R? Well, we did everything we possibly could. Without cutting any frames. The old tricks where we make edits and then put them back in and make it look like we've made changes, and they saw right through it, and it didn't work. But I shouldn't tell this story, but there was a guy at APCO Embassy who was, I forgot what his job function in, his name was Walter, and he had a relationship with somebody over there, and APCO Embassy at that time, well, after Phantasm came out, they used to refer to Phantasm as the movie that saved APCO Embassy. So they had maybe more of an incentive than we did to get an R rating. And he went over there, and I don't know if he twisted arms or brought him a bottle of scotch or what, but one day they called up and they said, you can have your R rating. No, absolutely not in part one. Yeah. But when part two came around, they hammered us a bit. When here you can see it. You've seen the sphere sequence in this, and then you watch the sphere sequence upcoming. There's been a few cuts.
Was there something about that time period where even like Leatherface, there was lots of cuts, from like 88 to like 94, where they were just saying, Nick, no gore at all and anything? Was that being pressured on with the second one?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do a chart in terms of what the political pressure is, because if it's a period of time when you have Congress people making a lot of noise about violence in movies and television, the MPA gets extremely restrictive. And then when it's not, like today, when we're busy with the economy and all this stuff, nobody's talking about violence in movies. And it's a great time to be a horror filmmaker.
We're going to take one. Does anyone have any question they have to ask? It's way back.
Yes, for Angus, it'd be an honor if you would sign your figure. I know it's not a real question, but it really means a lot. I saw the movie when I came out of high school. They made a great interpretation of you. It'd be an honor if you'd sign this.
All right, that's not right. We're going to go to you. Did you have your hand up? Yeah, we're going to you.
No, we fully intended to put it in the movie. Do you guys have any recollection of what that scene was?
Not a bit, actually. I remember the ice cream shop. Of course, I was in Alhambra, right? And
it's still Fosselman's ice cream.
Fosselman's. And I remember, we hung out there for like a whole night and day or whatever, and I was real tickled because I got to play down about. They showed Reggie playing guitar on stage, and I played down about 3 of my songs, my original songs. So it was pretty cool. And of course, I was thinking, well, when we got to the part where we needed music for the porch, I was very gracious with Bill in going, hey, what do you got, man? Because I've already got 3 songs in this movie.
And they were good songs.
Great songs. But at any rate, that ice cream shop stuff was really fun. We ended up making Michael into a big sundae and eating off him. It was great. Great.
Was there anything you would like to say to lead up to the next 2, Don?
Well, Phantasm 2 was the Phantasm that we had the most money to spend. We had a full $3 million on this picture, so we were styling and profiling.
Rocking.
Yeah. So in some of the really, while I love the organic effects of part 1, we had a much more sophisticated effects team with Mark Shostrom and Greg Nicotero and Bob Kurtzman. And so we got to do a lot of good stuff. It brought in some interesting new cast members. In addition to Mark, there's Ken Tiger and James LeGros, who's a wonderful actor who came in and took over the role of Mike in the film. So it's certainly a different portrayal, but very genuine and cool. So curious to see what you all think.
Well, thank you all for coming down. Really glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.